Back on Sports 225 with Dale Brown, my good friend Dale Brown, who would probably have doubted during the time that I covered him for the last 8 years of his career and the way we butted heads that we would ever become such good friends. But I always maintain it's just because, A, we're not on opposite sides of things, and that I've matured, and you keep saying it's because I married up.
I think you did change a lot. I think you were talented, you were bright, you loved sports, but you were more cynical. Not that you can't be critical, but there's light years of difference of being cynical and critical. And I think what set us off, I never tried to I didn't want any media to take advantage of me. I didn't want to kiss up to anybody. I just spoke from my doggone heart. But I remember you asked me a question one time, and it was kind of a crazy question, sort of. And I said,
me ask a crazy question?
I said to you, Lee, that's really a stupid question. And I saw you buckle up like this here, and you got sort of defensive, and then you kind of were on a little mission for a while. But I never was mean. I always treated you with same dignity of everybody else. But I do think we all change. We all mellow. We all get wiser. Thank God for that. Holy heck.
I could spend a whole show telling Dale Brown stories. One of my favorite ones, though, was SEC basketball media days, and I wasn't necessarily the beat writer, but it was over in Birmingham, and Dale, whatever happened, I remember, just wrote the story, and the next day the paper came out. We're back in Baton Rouge, and the phone rings. You know, ring, ring.
What time?
Yeah. No, luckily it wasn't crack of dawn or late
2
at
a.m.
night. No. And normally when we had those, that was really epic. This was just a regular call. I'd had a couple of beers. I was sitting there watching TV, and the phone rang. Hello, Lee? Yep, it's Dale. Hi, Dale. He goes, when you wrote in your story that when I said whatever, that some of the reporters in the rooms chuckled, what did you mean? And I said, well, I didn't mean anything. And he said, and Dale says, well, what do you think they meant? And I said, well, I guess they thought what you said was funny. Okay, click. And then I didn't see him again for a few days and talk, you know. But you were always on top of things, though.
I would, you're very accurate in a lot of this. Jeff Bahe was our team chaplain. Father Jeff Bahe.
Yeah, and if you don't think there's a place in heaven for that priest.
From Frankstown, Zachary. But anyway, when I retired, he took me to lunch at TJ Ribs. And at the end, we'd finished, he said, Coach, he said, I really enjoyed those 10 years of your team. It was really fantastic. And he said, I really enjoyed being around you guys. And he said, I want to give a little constructive criticism to you. He said, you're a pretty bright guy. But he said, you're involved in controversy so much because you always lead with your heart instead of your head. So I conspicuously did not really, I wasn't defensive. I'm glad you spoke your piece, Father, and thank you. I went home that night, I thought it over. Next morning, I called him early. And I said, Padre, you knew yesterday I didn't respond. I'm going to respond now. I've thought over what you've said. Now, my answer to you doesn't justify my litany of mistakes or my dumb things I did, but you're 100% correct. But what I did, I can manipulate my head, but I can't manipulate my heart. So the mistakes I made weren't thought, they just came from my heart.
Well, and that's true. The most passionate man about things that he believed in, right, wrong, or otherwise. Right?
And
you don't suffer fools well, and you especially don't suffer injustice well.
And you do stupid. Some of the stuff I did.
Well, you did. You did a couple of things.
Stupid. They were stupid things. So you look back and how did I do that?
Let me say this. Anytime during basketball season, to this day, if you go to an SEC tournament and SEC media days before the season, even at the NCAA Final Four and everybody's together, somehow if your name comes up, people start telling stories, and they still do. So how about that? So how about, though, in the past few months, some of the things that have happened with LSU basketball? The 60-year anniversary of the 53 team, which, of course, that team went to a Final Four, which, of course, brought people naturally start talking about your 81 and 86 teams that went to the Final Four. And Johnny Jones being the coach. It's been a real interesting time of resurgence in interest and excitement about LSU basketball, but fun talking about the old days. Do you agree?
I think there were probably the most indelible impression I've got about these bringing teams back and etc. In order to be a powerhouse at LSU, You must get your local players to come to LSU. You must get the Frank Bryants. You must get the Bob Pettits. You must get the Ned Clarks. You must get the Howard Carters. You must get the Ethan Martins. I mean, I can go down the line and name a whole litany. You must get those guys because they're your local stars. Derek Taylor, Glenn Davis, Garrett Temple, Collis III. And Johnny Jones has got the best player in this state. This Jarrell Martin is something. And he's not only a great player, but he's humble, like Frank was humble today with all the honors bestowed upon him. If you don't have any honors bestowed upon you, it's easy to be humble. But people start praising you and what have you. He'll do that. And he has a great coaching staff. This team, the 78 thing now, tomorrow they're honoring the 78 team that beat Kentucky. Look at that team. We had stars from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. You got to get your good home talent. I'll give you one. I'll give you one.
All right. I'm going to hold my question.
Timeout.
All right.
The 53 team.
Right.
How many starters they have from Baton Rouge? 81. How many starters from Baton Rouge? 86. How many starters from Baton Rouge? 2006. I believe we're talking about probably 12 players in those Final Four teams.
Maybe
That's
more.
3 a year.
2006 team,
Yes.
Yeah, it was all Louisiana practically.
For one time, I'm not going to embellish it.
Well, one of the guys from those teams, of course, was Bob Pettit, who we talked about earlier.
Right.
He was from Baton Rouge. Now, you told me the story that I want you to tell them before we go to break.
I called Bob the other day. A mutual friend was in the office, and he wasn't in. He called back later, and before he hung up, he told me one of the 3 greatest Shaquille O'Neal stories I know. He says, Dale, are you in contact with Shaq regularly? I said, I sure am. He said, let me tell you what, he is really a swell guy. Let me tell you a story on him. It's 5 years ago, my wife Carol, I think she was just in her process of cancer, or was just starting to get sick. We go to an LSU football game. And if you take little grandson, Bobby, and he said, Carol, she said, oh, look who's down on the field, Shaquille. Take Bobby down and get an autograph and have him shake his hand. Carol, I'm not going to do that. I'd feel uncomfortable. So he thought he got her off his back. 2 minutes later, Bob, please take Bobby down. I'm not taking him down there. He doesn't even know who I am, Carol. Now I'm sure I got rid of her. A minute later with a softer voice, Bob, please take your grandson down. Okay. So he said, I go down there reluctantly. I'm thinking, this is going to be embarrassing. What's Bob Pettit doing down there? And he said, we just stepped on the field. And Shaquille came over, Dale. He gave me the biggest hug, Mr. Pettit. And he said, he kissed me on my left cheek. And he said, who's this fine-looking guy? Picked him up, teased him. As he was leaving, he came again and embraced me and kissed me on my right cheek and said, Mr. Pettit, it's always nice to see a man like you. That's class.
Well, you and I both know Shaq and know what a great story that is. Dale Brown, the former LSU basketball coach, 25 years, second winningest coach in SEC history after some guy named Rupp, and you beat Kentucky more than anybody else, didn't you? No, don't shake your head. No, yes, you did.
Yeah, no, I'm shaking my head. It's hard for me to comprehend we did beat them more than anybody in the nation.
I know. All right, we got to take a break. We got one segment left here on Sports 225.